I'm Amy Aldendorfer. I'm the horticulture agent here in the county. I have been here since 1995, so I'll let you all do the math. It's No Math Monday today too, so anyway, so we're going to talk about gardening options for everyone, and usually we talk about raised beds, container gardening, and that's kind of what we're going to do. We are going to stick to the vegetable side of gardening. Basically, we're going to kind of walk through gardening. We like to garden for fresh vegetables, right? We like to eat what we grow. We exercise because who wants to go to the gym? And you know, there's lots of varieties that you can buy seeds for that you can't find in the grocery store. And by the way, do you know what varieties you're eating in the grocery store? No, because it just says onion or it just says red tomato. So when you're planting our garden, we need to site the garden properly. We don't want it to be under trees or near trees because trees are very efficient at pulling water out of the soil, and they will starve your vegetable garden to no end for water and nutrients. So if you look at tomatoes, and I've done this a little bit so I know, I don't like to eat fresh tomatoes, and everybody should go, gasp, the horticulture agent doesn't like fresh tomatoes. No. But I like cooked tomatoes. So for me, I am one person, I'm a family of one, I would plant 3 to 5 tomato plants that I could eat for fresh. That'll probably do me a lot. I don't know, 3 to 5 plants is a lot of tomatoes. I'll tell you what my record system is. It's one of those little sheet protectors, and I put the labels of the plants that I grow in there. I write the year that I grow them, and sometimes I'll put the seed packet in there if I remember. Sometimes there's a little like note card in there that if I don't use all the seed, I'll say, hey, I planted butter crunch lettuce this year, or whatever. I did not make this PowerPoint, and there's a few discrepancies that I will tell you about as we go along. It should say lump vegetables together, not perennials, because we're talking about vegetables, but we want to lump all of our families together. So do you know what a plant family is? So say we were talking about tomatoes. Tomatoes is in the solanaceous family, which includes potatoes, peppers, eggplant, tomatoes, and tobacco. And the reason I tell you about tobacco is because we're pretty rural, we have been rural in the past, and you may have had a tobacco patch where your backyard is, if you know where it has been. Or if you live on a farm that you are transitioning to, vegetable gardens, you don't want to really plant any of those other plants in a tobacco patch because all of those plants get some of the same diseases and insects. So when we say lump them together, when we talk about in the garden, we're going to kind of put those in the same spot because we can treat them the same if they do get a disease or insect, and we can move them around the garden kind of in the same block. Taller plants on the north side. That's great advice. Well, and then I'll tell you how to break that rule. If you plant your taller plants on the north side, and if you don't know what the north side is, there's an app on your phone called Compass, which is very helpful. I use it all the time. Practice crop rotation if possible, okay? If practical. If your garden is 4x8, it's really hard to transport your tomatoes from one 4x4 corner to the other 4x4 corner. So that may not be practical. It may be practical to have 4 beds so you can rotate those crops in 4 different years, but usually people have a little bit bigger garden. I have a very small garden because I'm one person. We have spring, we have summer, and we have fall. People usually forget fall because by that time we are tired of gardening. Usually by August we're like done. We actually have about 12 or 15 actual seasons in Kentucky, and I think we are in spring number 2. I have it on good authority that this year spring will be on April the 4th from 2 to 4 p.m., so don't miss it, okay? I will be working that day, so I will miss it, so I will need your feedback because I will have missed spring. And then cool season crops like to mature into the fall. They're much better there. But we plant our broccoli and our cauliflower and our cabbage in spring. The warm season crops, when do we plant those? Like tomatoes are warm season crops.
Derby Day.
Derby Day, great! I was like, somebody's gonna know that. And there's planting dates for various crops. And you'll see some of them are really early in the season. They have early, we are considered central Kentucky, so look at that. But they also have the latest safe planting date. And then if you do something in containers, say you have a very small place to garden and you're doing it in containers, you can actually put those on wheels and roll them in if there's a frost event, and then roll them back out in the morning. So you can kind of get a little bit of season extender for that. If you don't know where to start for vegetables in Kentucky, this is a good list. It's a little bit older because they've actually trialed these vegetables in Kentucky and made sure the varieties are good. The mature time is, if you, like we're in central Kentucky, we have a pretty good long season. Our last frost date is usually about the 3rd week of April. Our first frost date in the fall is usually the 3rd week of October. So we are looking at about 6 months. Is that right? Did I do math right? 6 months of a good growing season. So what that means is we can usually grow all these things. But if you're in eastern Kentucky and you live up on a mountain, your last frost date in the spring may be the 2nd week of May. And your first frost may be the end of September. So your growing season has definitely shortened. So think about that when you're looking at maturing times, or days to maturity is what they say on the seed pack. Has anybody heard of All-American Selections? No? Okay, great. They are a group that has been around since 1932, and they were trialing bedding plants or flowers, and they also do vegetables. There's trial grounds all around North America. There's some in Canada, there's some in Mexico. So they have comparisons with new varieties and the old standards. The only caveat for these plants is that they have to be grown from seed, and if they're a flower, they have to flower that first year. If they're a vegetable, they have to go from seed to fruit in 1 year. Does that make sense? So there's no cuttings, there's no division, propagation, so you should be able to buy all these plants in a seed packet. So if you see that AAS winner logo, they can put that on the seed packet. Then you know that it's a good pick for a newbie gardener, or for somebody that you're going to try something different, you're not real sure what variety. This one's good. So Dynamo is a really small-headed cabbage. It's about a 1 or 2 pound cabbage, and that's really good for fresh eating. This is Savoy Express. This one's really good for sauerkraut or kimchi, or something where you're going to ferment that. Because of the crinkling part of it, it really ferments well. Here's the pea, Patio Pride. Get it while you can. This is a 40-day pea. So it should go from seedling to fruit in 40 days. Where would you find the AAS brand of seeds? They are not a brand of seeds. You will find them in any major seed catalog. Cucumber Diva. Diva is a really good one because it's a parthenocarpic cucumber, and that means that it can actually produce fruit without being pollinated. Onion. I can't grow onions. This is a day neutral onion, so that means it's a 100-day onion. So you got to plant these early, and you got to keep them in the garden for a long time. Well, this one is a delicata. This is actually a really and I'm not a big vegetable eater, I will tell you all that. But I've had this roasted and really creamy, has a very mild squash flavor. I like this Blue Prince, he's very new. He's just come out this year. Orange Smoothie is one that's been around for a little bit, 2002. So 18 years between the two. Blushing Beauty Pepper, one's kind of different because it starts out as ivory colored, and as it matures, so the green part of the pepper is ivory or cream, and it matures into it goes through like a pink, a blush, or whatever, and then it turns red at the very end. This is a new variety called Apple Yellow. It looks like an apple, doesn't it? Also kind of looks like a pepper, but it looks like an apple. If you boil that corn, they do tend to fade a little bit, so that if you grow Indian summer, you might want to roast it or grill it. But if you boil it, it kind of fades a little bit. But hey, who could say that I've got multicolored sweet corn? Sweet American Dream is a new one. It's a 2018, or newer one. It actually beat out Honey and Pearl or Honey Select in the taste test. So this one's a super sweet corn. I like the bicolor because we're fancy that way. It's very tender, and it's a 77-day corn. So it's a fairly long season corn. There's 2 different kinds of okra. These are both spineless okras. Candle Fire came out 2017, and that color stays with it when you cook it. You can also use it as an ornamental because not only is the fruit red, but the stems and the petioles of the leaves are red. So, and okra is a really pretty plant because it has that hibiscus type flower on it. And you can put that in your flower beds. Who said the vegetables have to go in their own little cage of the vegetable garden? Put them in the flower beds because some of them are very pretty. So here's New Queen and Sweet Beauty. These are smaller icebox type watermelons. So you remember the Charleston Grays, which were like the 20 pounds. You had to put it in a cooler with ice. These are the smaller, maybe 5 to 6 pounds. So they'll fit in your refrigerator. The best way to pick a watermelon is the bottom part of where it touches the ground should be a cream color. It'll go from white to cream. The other best way to tell is where that vine goes into the fruit. There's a little tendril right there at the leaf. When that tendril dies back, that watermelon is ready to be picked. They also should slip pretty easily off of that vine. If you have to really tug, it is not ready. Let it mature a little bit longer. Who eats Swiss chard? Yeah, okay, good, awesome. This is another one that I would regulate again to the flower bed because this picture does not do it justice. It does a really nice job. They're the orangey oranges and the neon pinks. If you don't like Swiss chard, you can just plant it for the ornamental effect. But it is also a good tasting Swiss chard for that. Papaya pear is actually a summer squash. It's related to zucchini and crookneck. It doesn't quite get, it's not as heavy a yielder, so you're not going to go August 14th, you're going to get a whole bag of papaya pears. But you can use it in a substitute for zucchini or squash. I like it just kind of sliced and fried with butter and onion. Eggplants. Apparently a couple, 3 years ago, there was this big eggplant craze. So these are Japanese style eggplants, and they're Hansel, Gretel, and Fairy Tale. Actually, this picture was on our vegetable gardening guide about 5 or 6 years ago. They do slice up very nicely, and they tend not to have as many big seeds in there, so you don't have to kind of scoop those seeds out. Squashes again, these are in no particular order. I don't know what order they put them in. Both are excellent for eating. Bonbon, it says you can turn those upside down and hollow them out and use them as a soup bowl. Honey bear is actually an acorn squash, and this one has a very compact bushy habit. So this one is good for a smaller garden. If the only thing you grow in tomatoes and you don't know which one to grow, check the All-American Selection site because every year they have 2 or 3 or 4 tomatoes, like one for every type of tomato that wins. And they have tomato varieties that go way back, I think 1932 they still have that tomato variety. But they do tend to look a little different. There's a purple tomato on there. If you grow Chef's Choice, you have a choice of any color tomato because they have a Chef's Choice red, pink, yellow, orange, and I think they call it blue or purple. So there's 5 different varieties in the Chef's Choice variety of tomatoes. And they're all good slicing tomatoes. They're not ginormous, but they're pretty good size, like on a sandwich size. This is actually a cut leaf cilantro. And did you know that cilantro grows from coriander seeds? So coriander, don't take your spices out of your cabinet and try to plant them into cilantro. They're probably really dry in the spice cabinet. But yeah, if you get your cilantro to flower and fruit, you can actually save those seeds and make coriander out of them. Carrot purple haze. We are now coming back into the age of the carrot. And carrots come in all sorts of colors. Purple haze, the only issue I have with this one is if you cook it, it turns orange. The purple is not heat stable. So if you want to grow purple haze, grow it in a container because you'll get those really pretty tapered carrots. And you won't get the claws if you grow them in our Kentucky soils, the gnarly ones. It really is good in a salad. You can grate that into a salad really nice or make the little medallions. But if you cook it, it does tend to turn orange. This potato is actually grown from potato seeds, not the little seed tubers that we buy in the store and cut them up and leave the eyes on. This is more of it's actually an actual seed, so you can buy a seed packet. This is new from 2019. had the 19 part right. The thing about seeds with potatoes is you can avoid some of those potato-borne diseases that you may get on a seed potato. So these grow from seed to potato in one season. Kale, I know that kale's a big thing. Here's a leafy kale prism, and that's actually a tightly ruffled leafy variety that does well in containers, so it's a smaller kale. Conan is actually, it's a member of the broccoli family, so again, you're going to grow this in cooler seasons. You can actually, you're eating the stem of the plant, and it resists insect damage. Colby can be eaten raw, but it's good in soups, as fritters, roasted, or steamed. And the young leaves can be used as like a pot green. So you could put them in with collard greens or something of that sort. So broccoli, this one is actually a really cool one because it's a stem or a stemming broccoli. So broccoli usually puts on one giant head at the top, right? And that's what we buy in the grocery store. Well, this one, if you leave it in the ground after you cut off the main stem, it grows all these little florets on the side branches, and then all you have to do is cut the little florets off. Green beans, who grows their own green beans? They're a lot of work, I'll tell you that. I usually grow the purple ones because I can see them in the foliage. Like I told you, I have a hard time seeing green beans. But these, if you try muscote, it's a French term for good luck. The flowers of those plants are actually above the leaves. So the fruit's going to be above the leaves. This one's going to be easier to pick because it's a bush variety. So you don't have to put it on a pole, but you can put that bean up there and see it and pick it when it's the right size. Here's melon. Here's orange silver wave. Again, the fruit is a different color than the leaves. I can see that one in the field or in the garden. These are small fruit. They're about 5 inches oval size, so they're maybe 1 or 2 servings. Tastes like a cantaloupe, looks like a honeydew. This is my favorite watermelon in the world. This is Harvest Moon. This is a seedless watermelon. The seedless watermelons need a pollinator, so you'll find that in your packet of seed that you'll have 2 or 3 seeds that are like a different color, like pink or blue. You need to plant those with your watermelons because those are the male flowers that are going to pollinate your seedless watermelons. We have small gardens, we have small yards, and we want to get more produce out of less space. So you can see that these containers are pretty small. They also have saucers on the bottom. I would recommend getting the biggest saucer you can for your pots, especially when you get these little teeny tiny pots because they will dry out very quickly in our summer heat. Now, this is the Mac Daddy of raised beds. You do not have to be this fancy because there's a lot of soil. If these are like 24 to 36 inches tall, that is all soil in there. If you have a raised bed that doesn't have a bottom on it, which I recommend no bottoms, and you can actually add garden soil with some compost to lighten it up, and you can, grow awesome stuff in raised beds. You don't want to put garden soil in a container because it'll totally change. Once it breaks the connection with the actual garden soil, garden soil gets weird. It gets hard and lumpy, and it's just not good stuff. Usually raised beds are 6 to 8 inches tall. Length varies. The width is as long as you can get to the middle of the bed. So we usually say 4 feet for an adult. If you're working with kids, you can go shorter, like 2 or 3 feet. And the length is variable. We do 8 feet because if you take 2 8-foot, you have 3 pieces of wood 8 feet long, you cut one in half, you have a rectangle 4 by 8. It just makes it easy on the cutting. Construction materials, anything goes, really. It doesn't matter what recycle what you have. You can use treated wood. The treated wood these days is with this alkaline copper quaternary, or ACQ, which doesn't have any arsenic. It doesn't have any lead in it. It's just copper, which is great because here's some examples. We got cedar logs and wood. Concrete blocks looks pretty snazzy. Composite decking. Sometimes they come in colors. I didn't know that. Here's some brick. That one looks like the front bed of somebody's house, and they're growing lettuce. I'm like, that's pretty. Treated wood. Sometimes you need to put the little corner blocks in there. Sometimes you don't. I really like square foot gardening because it limits the amount of space I have to look at. If I know how much I can plant in one square, we'll get to what that looks like here in a minute. Containers, again, anything goes as long as it has a drainage hole. So here's one that's self-watering. They do have those. These are the grow bags I was talking about. Here's a metal pail. Again, as long as it has a hole in the bottom, you're good to go. Here's recommended varieties and container sizes. Like I said, I got some big containers and I like them. The problem with big containers is that you have to have a lot of potting soil to go in there. Raised beds, you're going to use your good garden soil. You're going to add that with organic matter, either compost or composted manure. And I'm going to tell you this is a wrong recipe because it says 1 part good garden soil. Ixnay off that, just knock that one right off the list. You're going to do you're going to use some type of peat moss or core, which is that brown outer husk of the coconut. So that's the organic matter. You're going to add compost to that. You can add composted manure. But usually we have that peat or core peat moss-like base. And then you can actually add vermiculite or perlite to your mix to lighten it up a little bit. Or you can just buy potting soil. That'll work too. Don't buy anything that's sold by the pound because potting soil should be light and fluffy. If you have to buy a 40-pound bag of something, you're buying the wrong stuff. Buy it by the cubic yard or buy it by the cubic foot. And usually it's bought compressed. Here's a fancy, looks like a strawberry box. Here's a square foot garden at the top, as is this one. This one, they've got a little shade over the top of this one, because they're growing lettuce in the summertime. Growing vegetables intensively. You will have to fertilize them if you have containers. I tend to use a monthly fertilizer pellets that every time I water, it fertilizes them because the water dissolves the fertilizer a little bit. So even though I'm watering twice a day, they're getting that much nutrients that they need. Raised beds, you're going to do it at least 1 to 1.5 inches a week. If you've got a soaker hose, put a pie pan underneath there, and when your pie pan is full, because they're about 1 inch deep, turn the water off. Pretty easy to figure that out. Containers, in the spring, it's not going to be so bad, probably every 2 to 3 days. In the heat of the summer, you're going to do it once or twice a day, sometimes 3 times. You do not want to let that peat moss or that core dry out at any point in time because it's really hard to get that back in there. During the growing season, we use a IPM, an integrated pest management, so we're going to plant resistant varieties. We're going to do crop rotation, hopefully, if we can. We're going to actually scout and note the problem or presence of problems before we, maybe we're looking at beneficial organisms. Does anybody know what this is up here at the top? That is a ladybug larva. That thing eats aphids for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until it turns into a ladybug that then eats more aphids 24/7, 7 days a week. They call those aphid alligators, and that's what they look like. They are beneficial, so don't squish those. If you don't know what you're looking at, take a picture, email it to me. I can tell you what it is. The caveat of that is the picture has to be in focus. Because I will tell you, I'm like, I can't tell what that is. It's not in focus. Because I like to blow it up on my big screen in my office on my computer, and I can really see it. And we're not going to spray anything unless we have to. Now, a lot of people ask me about organic. Organic just means that it is a naturally occurring substance, okay? That's what it means. So here's some examples of organic insecticides. These two, the horticulture oils and soaps and the BT products, I would use them, no problem, have no problems with those. Neem and rotenone, I'd be very careful about using. Although they're organic, rotenone is very toxic to mammals. Sweet corn, when the silks become, dry. If you want mature potatoes, you wait till those potato plants die. Storing vegetables, so we have cool and dry, cool and moist, and cold and moist. And tomatoes are in this like cool and dry would be like your potatoes. Cool and moist would be I think it's tomatoes. You just want to prevent them from drying, and then cold and. The pepper plant needs as much sun as it possibly can. Anything that produces a flower and a fruit needs 8 to 12 hours of sunlight a day. The leafy vegetables you can probably get away with to 4 to 6. So if you're growing lettuces or kale or anything like that, they can have about 4 to 6 hours of sun. And if you're doing root crops, it's like 6 to 8 because they need to store that sugars in their root crops.